Way off. Well, I'm joined now by former senior policy advisor to the US State Department's Israel-Palestinian negotiating team, Laura Blumenfeld, who's in Washington, D.C. for us. Good to see you again, Laura. And it seems that initial optimism about this latest round of talks has drained away.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I've heard U.S. officials describe the talks as combustible. This morning, I heard the words about to explode. And there's a reason why Bill Burns, our CIA director, is actually on his way for an emergency meeting in Doha. The U.S. is heavily invested in these talks for several reasons. First of all, we want to rescue the hostages. That's our most important goal. But we also want to rescue the U.S.-Israeli relationship with, which is kind of on the rocks right now with this imminent invasion of Rafah. There could be a serious dent in that ironclad U.S.-Israeli relationship. Second, we're talking about an end to the Israel-Gaza war, but we're really actually talking about three wars, because there's that official war between Israel and Hamas, but there's the unofficial war in the north with Hezbollah, which could blow across the region at any point. And there's also that next war. I mean, Israelis firmly believe that deterrence determines the next war. That's a date certain. There will be a next war in the Israeli mindset. And the only question is, do you eat them for lunch before they eat you for dinner? And then finally, the third reason I think why we're so invested right now in these ceasefire talks is the election. We are exactly 6 months out from the presidential election. All day long, if you turn on the news, we're watching, courtroom prosecutors hammering Donald Trump, but we're also watching college protesters hammering Joe Biden. I mean, I saw one protest where you had the pro-Palestinian demonstrators and the counter demonstrators both shouting, F Biden. It's not a good look for us.
No, and you paint a pretty depressing picture, I have to say. But on a more positive note, there was quite a lot that both sides did agree on, wasn't there? This idea of Israel being prepared to agree to a 6-week truce in return for around 30 hostages being released and also a prisoner release. What went wrong? Why did it collapse?
Well, I think the final, it's always the final 2%, 1% that trips up negotiators. And I think the key actually for the way forward is to focus on what we have now. If we can agree on today on a temporary pause and a temporary ceasefire, focus on that. There's a little bit of fuzziness about the end game. Both sides disagree clearly. It's existential. I mean, for Netanyahu, it's politically, it will be his death if he agrees to the end of the war on Hamas. And for Sinwar, who's the leader of Hamas, it will literally be his death. So you're not really going to get them to agree there on the end game. But if we can agree about today, that might get us to a better tomorrow.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, because it seems that the sticking point is what happens after this 6-week truce, because Netanyahu is refusing to give up on this plan to go into Rafah. And that is a huge issue, isn't it, for Hamas?
It's a huge issue for Hamas because it means the end of Hamas. But Netanyahu, he went to the airways today. He issued this rare video making the case directly to the Israelis, explaining, the Americans are saying it's either Riyadh, peace with Riyadh, or Rafah. You have to choose. And Netanyahu is saying, actually, it's quite the opposite. The road to Riyadh, to normalization and a more integrated Middle East, is through Rafah, because countries don't make treaties with the weak. That's his position. He's always said there's peace through strength. Unfortunately, October 7th brought them war through weakness. He's trying to get back to that place of strength, which is really hard. It kind of looks like a guy slow walking up a down escalator saying, give me more time and I'll get there.
Where do we go next, Laura?
Well, I think all eyes are on Bill Burns. We'll see if the Americans can pull it out. I mean, we sort of believe in happy endings. Netanyahu himself, I think, believes he's more of a Churchillian figure. He said today, today is Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel this evening. And he said, if we have to stand alone, we will. There were other times, like in World War II, when great powers stood idly by. America certainly isn't idle, and we're going to do our best.
Yeah, of course. And a quick thought about Al Jazeera being shut down. Why has that happened now, do you think?
I mean, two interesting points about Al Jazeera. I asked myself the same question. I think it's because Israel is planning on going into Rafah, and they figure, they're losing the story war. Let's win the ground war.
Yeah, they certainly say it's down to security issues, don't they, which is interesting. And of course, Al Jazeera is supported by the Qataris, who are acting as a mediator. Yeah,
it's strange. There are rumors flying everywhere. I mean, I just heard one report that The Qataris are thinking of actually shipping out the Hamas leadership to Beirut. It's definitely a time of, high drama, intense haggling. I mean, Secretary Blinken said himself last week, enough haggling, let's get to a deal. And so I do think that by shutting down Al Jazeera, they're acknowledging, in a sense, that the images coming out of Gaza are undermining Israel's standing, and they do plan on going in, which really gives me great cause for concern.
Yeah, and so it continues. Very depressing. Laura Blumenfeld, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get to sport now. Jasper has an